Now I'm going to scroll down in this HotDocs folders box. You can see I've moved from interviews and dialogues down to file locations. As I scroll down, you'll notice that I start to see some of the entries for the items I've mentioned. I'll start with your library file. What you see in the background is a library file. If you haven't watched videos about HotDocs or the demonstration, which I mentioned before, or your HotDocs intro video, you may not know what a library is. Just really short. A library is your gateway into accessing everything you need to do in HotDocs. If you are familiar with iTunes, it is your portal for accessing all your music. It would be the same way with HotDocs. It's your portal for accessing, editing, filling out all your templates if you're working in HotDocs desktop. I'm not talking about any web-based versions of HotDocs right now, just solely HotDocs desktop. When you first install HotDocs, everything, if you do a typical install, everything is installed to a local machine to save onto a local machine. So you'll notice that my library is stored, wants to save. If I create a new one, it wants to save to my documents, HotDocs, and then my libraries folder. That's the default, consistent for everything. It would be the same with my template files. This template files throws people. They think it's the Word template files and your any template file you create, as well as your form template file. However, it is actually only your HotDocs form template files. Those are your PDFs and your HFT template files that I mentioned before. You'll notice again, same folder, Documents, HotDocs, and Templates. And I'll also, while I'm here, point out answer files. You kind of see a pattern here. Documents, HotDocs, answers. Those answer files are the files, they're not a database, though they can be confused with one. But when you go to fill out, when your user, if you're the user, it may be you, but when a user goes to fill out a document, let's say the separation agreement, and they're asked, what's the client's name? What's their spouse's name? What are the children's names? HotDocs wants to store that data they're typing in to those questions so it can reuse it later in another document. And the file it stores all that data in is actually called the HotDocs answer file. Answer files will generally have a .anx Andrew, Nancy, xylophone extension. And they could have an ANS Andrew, Nancy, Sam extension. Those are the older extensions. So those files will be stored in your documents, HotDocs answers. Again, these are all defaults. I'll come and talk about where the Word documents are stored in a second, but let me talk about these general ones first. If I want to change where my library files are stored, I would select that entry, click Edit, and then browse to a new location. That doesn't move any files. It just tells HotDocs when a new library is created by a developer, it's put in X location. Or for a user, since they can't create libraries, what it does is it actually goes in and it says, here's where I'll try to look for a library by default. They can still browse out and find one in any location they have access to, but that's initially where HotDocs starts to look. Now let's talk, you could do the same in any one of these files, template files and answer files. We're going to talk about word processor files now. Word processor files have their own entry. You'll notice there's word processor right here. You can decide what HotDocs is installed for, whether Word, WordPerfect, etc. If you have more than one Word version installed, like I do, you can decide which one is the default. If you're having problems, for example, seeing certain toolbars launching or having certain items come up, you may want to click here to launch Word before sending word processor over. That's more so for a developer than a user, but I'll throw it out there in case you're having some problems. Beyond that, what I would do is I'll check our wiki and then call technical support. I'm going to expand this entry here and I'll go underneath HotDocs 2010, Word 2010, since it's the first item in the list. You'll notice there's 3 entries: document folder, template folder, and startup. Don't change the startup folder. It needs HotDocs, once it's run for the first time and it sees where the Word directory startup folder is, it puts some macros in there and you don't want to move those. It needs to be with Word's macros, so leave those there. Document folders, that's where HotDocs would try to put the finished Word files, your actual finished separation agreement, since I used the separation agreement as my example before. If I fill out the separation agreement, I'm all done and now I want to save it. This folder is where HotDocs would suggest saving it. The template folder is where your Word template files are actually stored. Now, while a user can't create a template file, it's important for a user to understand where their template files are stored, because this is where HotDocs is going to try to initially look for one by default. I will come back to this. I'm going to hit cancel here for a second because I want to note something.